So I am going live here for the first time on multiple different platforms. We'll be talking about blood sugar balance and how to balance your blood sugar via diet, but also lifestyle choices, and talking about the testing that I would recommend for supporting blood sugar balance. So let's get into this. All right. Welcome everyone. Blood sugar balance workshop. Thank you so much for joining me. And we are going to be talking tonight about the physiology of blood sugar and the different organs of the body that help to balance blood sugar, as well as how to create a diet and lifestyle to optimize your blood sugar levels. We're going to be talking about the symptoms associated with blood sugar, which I find is a really important topic that a lot of people don't know that much about. So, for example, we're going to be talking about erectile dysfunction and how erectile dysfunction and blood sugar balance are closely tied. I'm also going to be talking about the testing that I would recommend for monitoring your blood sugar balance, especially how to use a continuous glucose monitor, which is such a cool piece of technology that I use in my practice with my clients. So let's dive in first and foremost to just overview of blood sugar balance. So blood sugar is managed by three organs: your adrenals, your pancreas, and your liver. The pancreas is known as kind of the master blood sugar gland, and it excretes beta cells beta cells excrete insulin. And insulin is essentially the key that helps to unlock the cells and gives sugar to the cells. So the cells can either use that sugar as energy, okay, or it can be stored in the cells or in the liver. All right. So, and then we have the adrenal glands. The adrenals produce many different hormones. The adrenal glands are involved in a lot of different processes in the body. But one way in which they do work hand in hand with blood sugar is that they produce a hormone called glucocorticoids. Glucocorticoids help to elevate blood sugar levels, especially when we're under stress. Okay. Or if blood sugar levels drop too low, the adrenals will release glucocorticoids in order to speed up the release of glucose into your system. Right. And then lastly, we have the liver. So the liver is both a storage zone for glucose, but it also helps to convert and produce glucose for the body to use. When we're talking about blood sugar irregularities, what oftentimes comes to mind for most people is diabetes, insulin resistance, hypoglycemia. Okay. So, hypoglycemia is a very common blood sugar response for the majority of people, unfortunately. What we call the SAD, or the standard American diet, really does promote this hypoglycemic pattern. And when you're looking at hypoglycemia, for instance, on a continuous glucose monitor, which I use in my practice, what you'll see is that somebody will eat a food that maybe has a higher carbohydrate level to it, and that will in turn spike glucose levels up. Then what we see is that the pancreas overreacts to those carbohydrates and it drops your glucose really, really far down. And what people will experience when they have these super high and low glucose levels is they'll oftentimes get a headache. Brain fog is so common with blood sugar irregularities. Weight gain over time is absolutely as a result of blood sugar imbalances. And I'll be doing a whole workshop just specifically on blood sugar imbalances and weight gain, because there is so much research that we can go over on that topic alone. Other symptoms that people have when they're experiencing blood sugar irregularities are they'll suddenly just feel their mood drastically change. Depression and anxiety are very commonly found in correspondence with these fluctuating blood sugar levels throughout the day. So hypoglycemia is one of the most common ways in which people experience blood sugar irregularities. And then again, it progresses. That hypoglycemic tendency can progress then into actual diagnosable diseases, again, like diabetes type 2, type 1. And there's even a relatively new type of diabetes type 3, that does still need quite a lot more research in order to really verify it. But what researchers are discovering is that these blood sugar irregularities are also linked to Alzheimer's and other types of brain diseases. All right, so let me pause for a moment and answer any questions that are coming up. Let's see. Okay, so questions about just feeling tired in the middle of the day. All right, so Ryan is saying, I just feel exhausted after lunch. What is the deal with that? That's a really good question. So what I find with my clients' data, particularly using this continuous glucose monitor, is that our natural circadian rhythm for our day, uh, the cortisol naturally spikes. Okay, we wake up in the morning and cortisol is starting to go up, and that allows us to wake up and get going with our day. Cortisol usually spikes at about midday and then slowly starts to descend back down as the day progresses on. And oftentimes, what I see for people who have dysregulated blood sugar is that they have a really difficult time eating carbohydrates in that kind of midday zone. So that might be you, Ryan, if you find that like you have pasta for lunch or something like that, or like a high carb meal, that actually drops your blood sugar quite low. And anytime that people feel that significant drop in their blood sugar after they eat, we always want to be looking at what is causing that. And commonly the symptoms that people have is they feel really fatigued after they eat, they get a headache, or they lose focus, which, if you're at work and it's the middle of your day and you just had lunch and you have a huge project and you have meetings going on that afternoon, that is just such a unfortunate situation to find yourself in. So we really want to organize your meals and and also help support you holistically so that you're not having those big energy crashes after lunch. So that was a great question, Ryan. Thank you for that. Okay, so we've talked about all of the diagnosable blood sugar irregularities, but what the question that Ryan just asked is a really good one. The symptoms of blood sugar imbalances can go on for years, completely undiagnosed, as in they're not so severe that you would get diagnosed with hypoglycemia or diabetes, higher insulin resistance. But you may be finding that you have brain fog after certain types of meals, or again, you lose energy. What I see a lot of times with people is they're actually shaky. Okay. Um, and that eating actually helps with the shakiness. You've probably heard of the very scientific term hangry, which is I'm so hungry that I am angry. And that as well is absolutely a sign of some blood sugar irregularities. In my practice, what I'm always looking to do is to optimize my clients' lives, to improve their quality of life. And if you are spending a lot of your time feeling hangry, that is not a fantastic way to live. And a lot of people feel that way. Some people on a daily basis, multiple times during the day. So, a continuous glucose monitor is a device that you can apply usually to your arm. And unlike pricking your finger, which is kind of the traditional way that people track their blood sugar, a continuous glucose monitor will send continuous data, literally 24 hours a day, about your blood sugar. It is an incredible device. And the platform that I use allows me to track and watch my clients' blood sugar all day long. So I can send them an instant message and say, "Hey, I just saw that your blood sugar spiked after you had this particular lunch. Tomorrow, let's adjust. Let's take some of that fruit out. Let's give you more protein. Let's give you more fat and see if we can start to what we call flatten the curve." All right. So we're trying to reduce the huge spikes and falls in glucose. In addition, what that CGM does is it gives us data on blood sugar overnight. And oftentimes, what I see specifically with my clients who are in perimenopause, menopause, postmenopausal, a lot of times women in those seasons of their lives can start to experience quite a lot of insomnia. And more often than not, what I see on that continuous glucose monitor with those specific clients is that their blood sugar levels are dropping to very low levels, and that their body is actually waking up due to that crash in blood sugar. So the CGM, or the continuous glucose monitor, provides us just the most incredible amount of information. And what's important to note here is that every person's glucose levels are different. Your patterns are going to be different. How you respond to food is going to be different. So one person can eat pasta for lunch and have absolutely no response whatsoever, whereas another person could eat pasta for lunch and it could completely crash their blood sugar. Conversely, some people are so sensitive to carbohydrates that, for instance, they can't even eat like half of an orange at lunch because it will alter their blood sugar so much. Right. And I'm using lunch as an example, but truly, lunchtime is oftentimes the most common time that I see blood sugar irregularities, but it can happen at breakfast, it can happen at dinner, it can happen any time of day. If you are struggling specifically with insomnia, getting a continuous glucose monitor could be incredibly helpful for you, particularly if you struggle with waking up in the middle of the night. And that's where I can oftentimes see some improvements are made there. I also want to talk specifically about erectile dysfunction. So I have a lot of male clients and who are in their mid 40s to 50s, work with a lot of men in their mid 50s, and a lot of these men are suffering from erectile dysfunction, and the medications that they are using to help manage their erectile dysfunction oftentimes make them feel quite poorly. So when we think erectile dysfunction, a lot of times what people think is that, well, you're just not making enough testosterone. So we need to supplement with testosterone. That is oftentimes the case, absolutely. However, what I find is more often the case actually is that there is an imbalance between estrogen and testosterone. And I use hormone tests in my practice in order to identify some of those imbalances. So, and I want to link this up for you with blood sugar, okay? Because there's a really, really important link here with erectile dysfunction. There are enzymes called aromatase enzymes, and they love fat. So the more fat a person has on their body, especially around the waist and the hips, the more aromatase enzyme a person will produce. That aromatization enzyme actually converts testosterone into estrogen. So a man could be producing normal levels of testosterone, but due to that fat around his belly and that uptick in aromatization, he's actually converting that testosterone into estrogen. Now, Blood sugar irregularities, and especially a specific type of blood sugar irregularity called insulin resistance, can really uh, increase the production of fat around the middle in the abdomen and in the hips. So, for men who have erectile dysfunction, this is the step-by-step process that I would encourage you to go through. So, first step is to get a hormone test that also looks at your adrenal hormones, because oftentimes the adrenal hormones are deficient as well. And the type of hormone test that I use in my practice, I test DHEA and cortisol, which are adrenal hormones. And then I also test testosterone, estrogen, and even progesterone as well. Once you get the results back of that test, we want to look and see, are testosterone levels in a normal range or are they low? And again, same question with estrogen. Is estrogen within a normal range or is it actually high? Okay. And more often than not, what I see is that those estrogen levels are high in my male clients. Then the third piece is getting a CGM, a continuous glucose monitor. Now, I've mentioned that men who carry a lot of weight around their middle are more prone to this process of converting estrogen into testosterone, but I oftentimes see the same patterning in thin men as well. It really just depends on the fat storage that we have going on. So once we get that CGM in place, we're then watching to see, are there huge spikes in blood sugar? Is blood sugar higher than it should be? Okay, or is it lower than it should be? Okay. Paying attention to all of those things so that we can streamline the blood sugar pattern and get rid of those big ebbs and flows, because it's in those huge ebbs and flows that people tend to gain weight, men and women. The best way to stabilize those blood sugar ebbs and flows is to focus on carbohydrates. And here's what I mean by that. We want to make sure that you're eating quite a lot of protein, quite a lot of fat. Vegetables are incredibly helpful for balancing blood sugar. And then the carbohydrate is kind of just the cherry on top. So when we're talking carbohydrates, what you want to look for are carbohydrates that have high fiber to them. Brown rice is a great example. Quinoa is a great example. Wild rice, squashes, so butternut squash, spaghetti squash, anything like that. Those all have high fiber in them. And the more high fiber your carbohydrate is, the less of an impact it will have on your glucose. Most fruits are a good form of carbohydrates, although certain fruits like bananas and mangoes, for example, and grapes as well, have a very high glycemic index. In other words, they're going to raise your blood sugar a lot faster. So focus on fat, focus on protein, focus on vegetables. And then the carbohydrate is like the cherry on top. And if you're using a continuous glucose monitor, what you want to watch for are how high or how big are your reactions to those carbohydrates. If you're having a really big spike from a carbohydrate, then you've eaten too much of it. And again, it depends vastly from person to person what their response is to those carbohydrates. Now, in addition to the continuous glucose monitor, the other testing that I use in my practice to help identify some of these blood sugar imbalances are blood chemistry tests. So we'll be looking at insulin levels, we'll be looking at A1C, which is an average of your glucose over the course of 3 months. We can be looking at your actual fasting glucose levels, which that particular marker is not as helpful because, if the night before you had a big piece of chocolate cake and a huge bowl of pasta, that might artificially raise those glucose levels for that particular day. So the A1C test is a more reliable way to identify what kind of, if your blood sugar is struggling. Now, What I will caution you against, though, with these blood chemistry tests is that I oftentimes see people in my practice who are struggling with all of the symptoms that I have listed today: brain fog, energy crashes, um, shakiness before meals, moodiness before meals, insomnia. They will be having all of these symptoms, and immediately I will think, I think we need to bring that continuous glucose monitor in so that we can see what's happening. But even if I run a blood chemistry test on them, sometimes the A1C test will come back showing that there are blood sugar imbalances, but sometimes it won't. Okay. And this is especially true actually for people who have a really good diet already, but may be extra sensitive to carbohydrates and may just be more prone to having blood sugar imbalances. Some of the groups of people that need to be more aware of their blood sugar are women who have polycystic ovary syndrome. That particular condition is very much driven by blood sugar imbalances. So even if you have a really, clean diet, you still may be struggling with those blood sugar imbalances. Again, I mentioned women who are perimenopausal, in menopause, or postmenopause, particularly if you're experiencing insomnia. A continuous glucose monitor could be so helpful for you. Men who are experiencing erectile dysfunction, there again, we can glean a lot of helpful information from that continuous glucose monitor in combination with testing your hormones to be able to really holistically support you. Okay, so last bit that I want to talk about tonight is digestion. So I will be doing a full workshop just on blood sugar and digestion, but I do want to talk about some of the most important points here. It is very important with blood sugar that you're actually processing and utilizing the food that you're eating. And a lot of people are not. So, one of the key components that I focus on in my practice is identifying what is going on in the gut. The test that I use for that is the GI map. And that test gives me an incredible amount of information, and both on identifying beneficial bacteria in your gut, which are basically probiotics, but then it also looks at dysbiotic bacteria, bacteria that is causing digestive symptoms, but it could also be causing malabsorption symptoms as well, or issues. And then in addition, the GI map also helps me to understand functionally what's happening with your gut. So, are you able to digest protein? Are you able to digest fat? Now, when we're looking at the foundational elements, the foundational ways that we balance blood sugar, we're focusing on protein and fat. Okay, that is how we get those glucose levels to stabilize. If you are not digesting protein and you're not digesting fat very well, which is the case for a lot of people, it's going to be very difficult for you to balance your blood sugar if you're not able to utilize the foods that you're eating. So bear that in mind if you do go down this continuous glucose monitor path. Keep in mind that if you're not seeing the changes in the glucose patterns that you're looking for, it may be that we do need to do a little bit deeper digging and take a look at what's going on with your digestion as well. Last piece that I want to leave you with today is exercise. So, exercise and blood sugar, what do they have to do with each other? Quite a lot, actually. And this is another topic that I will be doing a deeper dive on in the future. Uh, there are some studies that have just come out about doing or taking a walk right after you eat. And what the studies are showing is that it significantly improves the response to the carbohydrates that you eat. Why is that? Okay. So, glycogen is a form of glucose specifically that is stored in muscles. Now, what's interesting about this, though, is that glycogen that's stored in your calf muscle, for example, cannot be used if you are just doing ab exercises. Okay, so that particular glycogen is used by that particular muscle group. In other words, it's really important to do like a full body workout on a regular basis in order to use up those glucose stores. Now, what happens to that glucose if it just keeps getting stored and it doesn't get used? It turns into fat. And there again is one of the link ups between our blood sugar system and how we manage blood sugar in our bodies and weight loss. You may be one of those people that has tried everything in the book in order to lose weight. You've done all the diets, you've limited your carbohydrate intake to 700 calories a day. It sounds absolutely awful, but I've spoken to many of you who have been down that painful path and you can't lose weight. So, what we're seeing is that, and again, I'm going to do another workshop on this because this is a very big topic, and the amount of research and data on blood sugar and weight loss is enormous. But needless to say, if you are struggling with blood sugar imbalances and you're also struggling to lose weight, there again, getting a continuous glucose monitor on board can really help us to understand how to balance your macronutrients. In other words, how to balance protein, fat, and carbohydrates together so that you are getting the right collection of nutrients that is specific to your blood sugar needs. Okay. If you have questions for me, please get in touch. There's a number of different ways to get in touch with me. So if you're on TikTok or Instagram, you can go to my bio. There, my office manager's email is there. You can always send a message there. If you're on Facebook, you also have my website or my bio there as well, my link tree that you can contact me through with that. If there are specific topics that you would like for me to talk about, I would love to know what those are. I do have plans in the next 2 months to do workshops on blood sugar and weight loss. I think the next workshop that I'm going to be doing is going to be specifically on how to use the data from the continuous glucose monitor. So I'll be talking you through exactly what you want to be looking at when you're using a continuous glucose monitor. We'll be talking about the research behind gut health and blood sugar. Gut health is definitely an area of expertise in my practice, and oftentimes where I start with all of my clients, because it is truly so foundational and so important to every other process in the body. So we'll be talking about specifically the relationship between blood sugar and gut health. And I'll also be looking at and doing a workshop specifically on how blood sugar imbalances impact sex hormones. And we really started to get into that topic a little bit today as we were talking about erectile dysfunction. But anytime that I have a new client who comes in who's experiencing hormonal imbalances, PMS, again, erectile dysfunction, perimenopause, menopause, infertility, gut health is number one on my checklist of the thing that we want to check in on first and make sure that everything is in good shape there. And then we do the hormone tests and we bring in the continuous glucose monitor as well. So we're really systematically checking the boxes to ensure that your hormones have what they need. And again, that blood sugar piece is really important. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I appreciate your time. Shoot me some questions if you think of them, and I will see you next time. Have a great night.